So I'm curious, we've been talking at Cybrary a lot recently about security enablement and how we kind of start to like raise that bare bone level of technical knowledge across the organization, because traditionally cyber teams have been kind of siloed off to the side, and the old school people, you develop your product and then the cyber team takes over and tries to break it and then lets all the devs know, and it's too late in the stack, right? And so I'm curious on how you guys at Tripwire kind of like you set up, like how do you start to think about like security in your teams and things like that when you're kind of like building this stuff up and kind of starting to grow and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's interesting you talked about your own employees hacking your own systems, because we have somewhat of a similar challenge at Tripwire as well. We have application developers. We're primarily a software development firm, right, delivering security software. And for us, our application developers have to be building secure software from the ground up.
Yeah.
I mean, our customers, federal governments, big enterprises, financial services companies, their standards are extraordinarily high.
Yes.
And a security breach for a security firm, has a major reputational risk. So what we focus on for the application developers is, people talk about DevSecOps, but the question is really, how do you educate them? How do you make sure people are taking security as seriously as they take quality?
Right.
And I think quality is something everyone understands from an application development stage, and any sort of security error should be thought of as a software bug. It's a flaw. It's a quality issue. And it's interesting, you can kind of take that approach and it applies to building SaaS products that are aimed for the cloud and looking for what's the education, what are the tools you want to use, how do you automate it as much as possible. Another interesting aside for Tripwire is we're part of a larger industrial organization, and so we have many customers in our own organization that actually manufactures physical goods. And you think about the people who are actually on the shop floor making, in our case, our parent makes things like routers, firewalls, and even Ethernet cable. And you think about, well, what do they know about security on the shop floor? And it's very little, actually, at that point.
So I do all of our DevSecOps stuff and pipelines and managing that, and it's interesting trying to get like developers now to start like knowing enough, because I think it's for a while you'd see a build failure, and certain people, like certain devs and stuff, kind of got in that habit of kind of like brushing it off, like, oh, it's a local failure or whatever and stuff like that. And so now my challenge is it's trying to get these security scans like earlier, faster in the cycle, but it's like a double-edged sword because it takes so much more compute to run a build, whereas like a UI developer writing a Node app wants his build to complete in 30 seconds or less, because locally it completes in 30 seconds or less, and like I'm trying to run this entire like security suite. And so for us, it's trying to find that interesting like balance on that type of stuff, because there's so many scans you can do, so many automation things these days. And so I found that I'm trying to get more cursory knowledge on some of the other things that are happening, which is great for us because I have unlimited content at Cybrary that I can not assign, but I can ask them to like take a look at certain videos, which kind of levels up that playing field. And I tend to get less like pushback from devs because the build took 2 minutes instead of the 45 seconds and stuff like that.
That's interesting, because we released a product actually at BlackHat last year called Tripwire for DevOps, and it was aimed at really hooking into that build process. And here at Tripwire, we actually hooked it into Jenkins and TeamCity, so that whenever people are making new builds, it automatically does that assessment. We talked to a bunch of our customers in the financial services industry. They said, if you can make that automated assessment less than about 5 to 15 minutes, then you're okay. Anything that takes longer, and now you're going to have some real developer frustration.
Oh yeah, throw up their hands. They're like, I'm blocked. I can't. I'm stuck and stuff like that. Yeah, we use Jenkins. It's a bulky beast, but it does everything I want it to do, and I can program in a bunch of logic to kind of optimize like what's scanning. Like, do we need to scan every time, or like things like that. Which is sad, because like that's the state of DevOps, is like we're all relying on this Jenkins like huge bloated piece of software that's been around forever. That I think last year they announced they're finally rewriting it and trying to go a different route with it and stuff like that.
One of the interesting things that kind of came out of our integration into that system was starting to understand from the developer's perspective, what is going to be really important for them. So like one of the important things was get the security results back in the same format. In the Jenkins case, it was JUnit compatible results, so it shows up exactly alongside their other automated tests.
Yeah, because they know where to, like, they've been trained enough to know where to go look at logs and things like that. And that's also my challenge is, like, I don't want them to jump into like 9 different systems that, they need access to in order to see the result or why the GitHub check is failing. It's trying to get all of that information in one little portal, which still seems to be a struggle, but like I think it's finally catching up, and people are finally starting to, kind of work this way. We were talking with another vendor this morning, and we were still kind of shocked for the number of vendors that have like security products that don't have APIs on them anymore. And it's like, for me, as the DevOps guy, that's a straight non-starter. Like, if I can't tie in my current systems to run checks, like, it's basically a non-starter at this point.
Yeah, actually, I saw some booth. I forget which vendor it was, but they said API-driven development. And I think that's totally the case. Increasingly, people, and I think this is because of the skills shortage in security and how well security people are paid. Right. So a good thing for people here at BlackHat, not great for if you own the budget,
right.
Which is if I have to go hire people to run these security tools, that's a non-starter. There are 1,000 products I could go buy and hire a bunch of people to go run. But really the trick today is, how do I get things more agile, more efficient, and reduce risk when I'm implementing that for my developers?
Right.
So how do you actually kind of get that 2 for 1?
Yeah.
And really that automation has to be absolutely key to make that work.
Yeah, and it's because we're already at a shortage. So it's like, if you're buying a lot of the times, these new tools like look great and they do a lot of things, but it's like, oh, well, the professional services contract on top of that to get it actually installed and configured is just like, it's the cost of another employee, and it's like, well, we're already kind of low to begin with, like.
Yeah. And I think actually the AppSec tools early on, probably going back a decade, probably did a disservice to that DevSecOps area, because the early tools required so much interaction when you were writing the code.
Yeah.
It integrated into the development environment and also was very false positive prone. So you give developers this new tool, say this is going to run all the time for you, and pop up all these warnings that may not actually mean anything.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to get yourself kicked back out of the development team for a couple of years.
Yeah, I had that problem. We put in like Sonar Cloud and stuff like that, and it does all the like code smells. It's like, this is a bad function you wrote and things like that. And they're all like, it's not a bad function. And it's like, all right, guys, like, you just need to let me know. We'll sit down. We'll make sure we're setting the right rules and things like that. But like, it was just like, oh, they found 100 things wrong, and they're like, it's wrong.
Well, my engineers are the same way. You give them one piece of wrong information, it's like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Don't show this to me again. Nothing like a pessimistic security engineer.
Oh yeah,
to make your life difficult.
One of my lead devs calls it Jenkins because it's so janky. He's like, it's just unreliable and stuff like that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It runs all the time. It works. It's great.
It works.
But he's like, no, it's just all these false positives and things like that. And I'm like, yes, you have to tell me it's not working before I can make it better. So, awesome. Anything you're looking forward this year at BlackHat? Keywords, buzzwords, fun things?
Well, I think DevOps in cloud has certainly gotten a lot of attention, but increasingly, you see IoT. And I think sometimes people see IoT and they're thinking, okay, my wearable, my watch, my smart thermostat. Yeah. But increasingly we're seeing these industrial IoT devices take over large enterprises with smart buildings, smart lightings, internet-connected HVAC systems and badge systems. And increasingly we're seeing those systems getting connected to the core network, creating new attack vectors. So we're starting to see that at BlackHat, and I think we're going to see even more of that in the coming years.
Yeah. We just recently opened up a new office, and I installed the network, and it was like trying to figure out all these like virtual LANs for all of these different IoT devices and things like that. It was just crazy because like back in the day you had like 4 VLANs. It was like voice, data, and wireless and guest or something, and now it's trying to segment all these different smart devices that are in the office and trying to keep them away from all these different other connections in the office. It was eye-opening.
It'll be interesting to see with these smart building initiatives if at some point that risk of crossing the cyber physical plane actually turns into more of a reality.
Yeah, and it seems that like some of these people that are putting in these systems, they haven't been trained as like a cyber like aspect and things like that. And so I think that's going to be interesting because these people that are designing the buildings, putting in the smart thermostats and things like that, I don't think there's a lot of thought around securing these or things like that. And at some point, I think that's going to hit a critical mass, and it's going to be a scattering to kind of go back and fix all of these things that we've installed now and didn't think about.
Absolutely. If you can just educate your employees and your contractors early about the importance of security, build security into the design, it's always a lot easier to build it secure from the ground up than try and retrofit security after the fact.
And I think one of the plus sides of all these like hacks that are kind of coming out recently and like credit cards and things like that is I think it's becoming, people are understanding security a little bit more because it's becoming more personal. They're like, oh, that was my credit card number that was stolen. And so hopefully that starts kind of like a shift of people starting to kind of not see it as like a whole separate section, but it's like security involves everybody. Like we're all responsible for this type of thing. And I think finally it's starting to click and things like that. Because like, especially from like an IT admin point of view, like I'm not going to stop every phishing attack that happens to come through an email, but like I need to know that at least people in HR like know things are happening and like these are things I need to look out for and know all the right process. Like, I need to report it. I don't need to open it, don't download any things. And I think we're finally kind of getting to that point where that level's been brought up. And hopefully we can keep kind of adding more and more to that type of stuff. So
absolutely.
Anything you guys got going on specific? You guys launching anything this week?
We have a bunch of new products we've come out with over the last couple quarters. New releases of our vulnerability management product, IP360. We've been expanding our capabilities into our cloud configuration auditing tool, the Tripwire Cloud Management Assessor. Also have launched some new capabilities around our industrial cybersecurity suite for our customers who are crossing over from the IT side and interested in securing their plant floor, their oil and gas pipelines, their utilities, those kind of sides of the fence.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like thinking about that, like I typically, because I don't come from like that hardware side, but like that's nuts if you think about like how many like things, like I have a bunch of friends that do like car hacking and things like that, and you're like, what? Like how is this still so completely insecure? Nobody's ever thought about like cybersecurity apparently in any of these things, but it's so massive, like warehouses and things like that. Like it's just the scale on that is crazy.
And people, I think people for many years had this perception, okay, these industrial networks, they weren't speaking IP originally, they were air-gapped from the corporate network, and so we'll just kind of leave them alone. But now today, they're all IP connected. The devices are primarily IP.
Yeah.
They are connected to remote access, to internet-facing points. Contractors have remote access into those systems. So the risks are profound, and if you're not taking a security stack very seriously for those kind of systems, that may be where the biggest risk for the organization lies.
Yeah, it's nuts. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I think we're good.
Awesome, perfect.
Excellent.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, appreciate you.